Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Aquavide Uskava, fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton.
Sláinte. And good day, Whiskey brothers, sisters, friends, and welcome to Whiskey Book Club's 8th book of Season 3 with author Ian Buxton. And he's author to these books, right? Well, so many more books, but we're talking about these two books right here. Well-read, well-noted books. And I'm honored to have him, and I'm honored to have you, the viewer, with us today as well. And really, where else would you delve so deeply into the subject of whiskey with the author than right here? And especially at 11 o'clock in the morning for us, and 6 o'clock for those in Scotland, England, where Ian is. So my name's Dolph. I'm the Spirit of Edmonton on social media, founder of the Whiskey Book Club, and I'm your host tonight. So for those of you that don't know very much about the Whiskey Book Club, I'll explain what we are about. It's a home base. It's a safe place for whiskey geeks like you and me that love to share a dram, or many drams, and a passion for reading, and mostly about whiskey or whiskey-related activities and books. So these books, I'll show them again. And 101 Whiskeys to Try Before You Die, Edition 5, and Whiskies Galore represent books 19 and 20 that I've reviewed on the Whiskey Book Club. I'm not sure which numbers they represent in Ian's journey, but researching many sites, Goodreads was the last one I came across with the most impressive listing of number of 54 books that he has. Now, I know this is a little bit inflated because they list everything from hardcover to softcover as being different, separate editions, different country releases as well. But 54 sounds very impressive. So we're gonna stick with that until he tells me it differently very soon. He's been in the alcohol business for over 30 years, starting in marketing with blenders Robertson and Baxter, which were then Glenmorangie, continuing various consulting roles, keeper of the Quaich, longtime whiskey judge panelist, and I think he's most well known as one of the most iconic whiskey writers ever. Ian, welcome. After all of that, how are you doing?
Well, hi, Dolph. Thank you. I don't know if it's 54. I've never done that sum. And as you say, if they throw in foreign editions and reprints, I'll have to go and check that.
It might be more. You might have more. That's good.
Might be more. Who knows? There might be stuff I've forgotten about. I don't know about iconic. I'm a bit shocked by that.
No, I'll give you iconic pretty easily.
No, dear me. Well, you're very kind. You're very kind.
If you want to, I could read all the other books and show all of the pictures of all the other books that you've done, and we can talk about your iconicness with this and that one.
No, that was an important book. That just go. Yeah. Oh, here we go. 101. Yes,
this is so many things, and there's. I don't know if they attributed this to you or not. Is this you, Ian?
No, there's another Ian Buxton. There is an Ian Buxton. He's a professor. I think he's a professor emeritus now of naval architecture at the I think it's the University of Newcastle.
Is that it?
And he's written. That's right. He's written on the Duke of York. He's written on Swan Hunter. He's written on Type 42 destroyers, and we do get mixed up a little bit from time to time. But no, I have never written anything, and I know nothing about naval warships.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you also, does that get in the way? I'm wondering if you've gotten invites to World War II type of conferences, or if he's been getting your checks because you have a lot more books than he has. So, or free whiskey that might show up on his doorstep. I'm just wondering if this is
maybe he gets the free. I don't know. That's a thought, isn't it? That's a thought. I don't know how active he is. I think some of those books go back a few years. I think he's, professor emeritus, so I assume he's. I've never actually met him. We did exchange some emails, some years ago now when the confusion first came up. It doesn't seem to be a problem, but then if it was a problem, I possibly wouldn't know about it.
Well, and I don't think he'd tell you if he was getting your whiskey, to tell you the truth.
Well, no, and I don't think I'd be very good at a symposium on World War II warships. I don't think I'd have a lot to tell them.
Well, if you brought out the whiskey and wanted to talk about whiskey,
yeah, they could probably, the naval connection might work there. That might work.
And you did do 101 rums to buy before.
I did, yeah, a few years ago. I'm trying to think exactly when that came out, but it's just a few years ago now, that book. And it was a funny thing. There was a period where I think, and the industry thought, and as it turns out, a couple of other authors as well, thought that rum was about to make some serious breakthrough, big breakthrough. And I think what was happening was quite a lot of whiskey enthusiasts were getting ticked off with the ever-growing inflated prices of whiskeys. And it was at the time when we were seeing all these no-age statement whiskeys coming out, and people were not happy about that. And we began to see on social media chatter, and the drinks industry and the trade in general began to talk about how rum's moment in the sun was finally going to arrive. And that quite a few people who were, concerned, anarchy or geeky, I don't want to disparage people in that way, but, enthusiastic about whiskey were getting more and more ticked off about the way whiskey was going, and they were drifting into rum. And that was certainly happening. And a lot of people in the bar industry, particularly the sort of cocktail people, were talking about the importance of rum. And so maybe whiskey, the industry as a whole, had got itself into a slightly dark place, and rum was going to exploit that. And at about the same time that realization, that penny dropped with me, and one of my publishers was very keen to have this rum book. I think the same thing happened. Dave Broom brought out a book about whiskey. Tristan Stevenson brought out about rum. Sorry, Dave Broom brought out a book about rum. Tristan Stevenson brought out a book about rum. The late Dominic Roscoe brought out a book about rum. Somebody else did. And at the same time that those 4, 5, 6 books on rum appeared more or less simultaneously, the rum pickup never really caught fire in the way that the industry had hoped, and that the bar trade had talked about, and the Scotch whisky industry in particular started to get its act together. So that book, it's a good book. I enjoyed writing it, and there's a lot of good stuff in it. Never really caught fire. And whilst there was probably a market for 1 or 2 new rum books, there really wasn't. Certainly here in the UK, there certainly wasn't a market for 5 or 6 rum books all at the same time. So I don't think any of them have done particularly well, and rum as a category just hasn't really performed as we all hoped it was going to 5 or 6 years ago.
Right. Well, there's still time, but I was part of the group that was dabbling in rum a little bit because of that, a little bit perturbed at what was going on, and the non-age statement was the reason. Now I'm fine with it, and it really just took people a little bit of time to adapt, but I absolutely agree. It's fantastic.
I think it was sort of dropped on people, no age statement. And I think a lot of nonsense was talked by the industry, and they tried to brush under the carpet the truth of it, which was that they were running out of aged stocks, and there just wasn't the aged whiskey to support the age statements in the volumes that they liked. And to fill that gap, we came out with no age statement, but we let a story about, it's all about the wood, it's all about the blending, it's all about this, that, and the other. Don't worry about this age thing. Age is not important. Now, having spent 30 years telling the consumer and telling the bar trade that age was important, just to do a complete 180-degree turn on that lacked credibility. Plus, at the same time, I don't know how you were affected by this, Dol, but at the same time, you were seeing some very hefty price increases being driven through, and what I consider to be fairly excessive, over-the-top packaging coming in. And you began to look at the retail price and go, well, how much of this is accounted for by the ritzy bottle and the fancy box, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not getting my 15, 21-year-old whiskey anymore. I'm asked to believe it's all about insert, fill the, and rum seemed a very good place to fill that gap. It had a great backstory, very interesting provenances, lots and lots of variety in the basic products themselves. So there was a lot to explore. So that combination of sort of heritage, product quality, backstory seemed to me, and seemed to a lot of other people, to be fulfilling a gap that in the market, if you will, that the whiskey industry had more or less willfully abandoned. But I think they put their act together pretty quickly, and the rum category never really got its act together in the way that it might have done. And as a result, my book and Dave Broom books and Dominic's book and all the rest of it didn't sell quite as many as we would have liked. But it's a good book.
But you have a lot of books to take the place of it. And
It was something, it was something my publisher was very keen to do. And I enjoyed doing it. I had a lot of fun putting it together. I learned a lot. And, I'm pleased and I'm proud of it as an effort. If someone said to me, did you write a rum book? I'm not going to shy away from that. Yeah, it was good. It was fun to do. It just hasn't kind of set the heather on fire.
Well, we're going to start really about, the jobs, because you talked about that as one of your positions, but I want to focus on all the other impactful positions that you've held over the last 30 years. So I've got a quote, as I usually do for things, and it's a little bit lengthy. So, making whiskey is a team effort, and for every celebrity or blender, there's an unsung accountant or salesperson in some hot, dusty land whose contribution passes without due comment. So that's page 128 of Whiskies Galore.
I wrote
this, though. It seems
I wrote
that. It's you. Every quote in here, I'm sure, is you.
I wrote that.
Unless you have ghostwriters. Maybe you do. You're that good.
No, I can't afford a ghostwriter.
Now, this seems to exemplify that you've had several jobs in the industry. It's what it hints to for me. And I hope that your present job is the best yet. However, you mentioned many great moments that you obviously take pride in this book. So I'm going to mention a few that happened early in your career that would make me very proud indeed. So you mentioned that you did the Native Rothschild Glenmorangie first ever branded single cast strength release by any distiller, which I like a lot. It's fantastic. And it started something that I really liked. And you suggested to your employer that in your early years that they should focus on single malts and buy Tobermory Distillery. So that's another great thing. And they should have. They did. They should have listened to you.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to know what you've done professionally that ultimately led you to this point in your career as one of the most recognizable names. You don't want to say iconic, but you are one of the most recognizable names in whiskey writing. So what other positions really helped you on that? And I'm going to focus it on your face. So here, there you go.
Yeah, looking worried. Both of those things that you relate to, they go back to, I guess, the early 1990s or even late 89, when I was working at Glenmorangie as their group marketing director. And yeah, we launched the Native Rothschild, which was ahead of its time, I'm afraid. But as you kindly said, has had a disproportionate influence. And then I did have a long debate with the company about whether we should try and buy Tobermory, which in those days was mothballed and owned by a Yorkshire mill owner who I think was really looking at it for property development rather than for whiskey. It turned out, to cut a long story short, that corporate life didn't get on with me and I didn't really get on with corporate life. So at about that, shortly after that, in the early 90s, I had actually left Glenmorangie and I set up my own consulting business. And that, in one form or another, continues to this day in one shape or form or another. But we were working in Edinburgh at that time, built up a consulting business, working we did a lot of work in the tourism industry. And at that stage, people were starting to build and develop brand homes, visitor centers. That was really coming on stream in quite a big way. So I worked with my team. We had some designers that we employed on a number of those, culminating on two very big projects. One was Dewar's World of Whiskey in Aberfeldy, and then subsequently the Dewar's parent, Bacardi, asked me to design and build their visitor center in San Juan in Puerto Rico, in the heartland of Bacardi production.
Nice.
So that was significant, and I wasn't doing very much writing at that time, other than I might well write, a guidebook for a visitor center or a text panel for an interpretive exhibition or whatever, and I was doing quite a lot of that. Some of which has long since been forgotten. But that was the early mid-90s, and that consulting business carried on in that form, doing a lot of design work and working in the tourism industry for about 20 odd years. So that was fun, that was interesting, and did a number of good things there.
So what was the most important? I'm going to separate the two, so the corporate life and the consulting life with the writing. So when did the writing start for you? When did the writing take off where you became sought after? Let's say, because there's writers that are fighting.
Did we
when
lose
did
the
you
connection?
finally have a name where they wanted Ian Buxton? Was that the 101 Whiskies?
Sorry, Dolph, I think there was a slightly choppy connection that came and went.
Sorry. I'll repeat. Separating the corporate life from your writing life, what was the book that helped you take off?
Sorry, you're back again. I missed a lot of that. The connection was very choppy.
Which book, if we focus on your writing career, helped your career take off? What was the first book that really did it? Was it the 101 Whiskies edition 1?
I suppose it was. Yeah, that was when I began to realize there was a lot of fun to be had in that. I had, prior to that, I had written, I've got a copy of it here. I had written a corporate history for Dewars, which was a commission direct from them, because we'd worked on their visitor center. And what had happened was I was never happy with any external copywriter that we hired to write the brochure or to write the video script or to write the text panels or whatever. So I just wrote them all. I thought I can do this better. I know what I'm doing than any external copywriter. And the coming out of that, they said, well, we would actually like an actual book, a corporate history. So I did that. I think I've got, here we go. There we go.
Oh, yes, and I've seen that. And that came out before, let's say,
but that came out before the Glen Glasser book. Yeah, and it came out before that. This came out in, let me see. I'm going to have to look in the copyright page. When did that come out? 2009. 2009. Okay. So that was a private printing for Dewars. I think they did sell some copies of it, but essentially it was a private commission.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that time, I had been working a little bit as a sort of side hustle or whatever you call it these days, side gig, whatever, with a guy called Neil Wilson. I don't know if you know or heard of Neil, and he at that time ran a small publishing company in Scotland, really quite small, called imaginatively Neil Wilson Publishing, and Angel Share. And he published two types of books. He published mountaineering and walking books because he was interested in mountaineering and whiskey, and he published some whiskey books. He'd actually published a number of books by Gavin Smith, who's a well-rated writer, and he'd done some of Gavin's early books. Now, what happened was Neil and I got together, and we had a little project called Classic Expressions, and we were finding old whiskey books, and reprinting those in limited editions. So we did a book called not that. We'll come on to that.
This is later on.
But that sort of led to that, actually. No,
this is yours. So I have the original, and I've got.
Oh, you've got an original. Nice. Yeah, nice. Good. Well, we'll come on to that because that actually sort of came out of this idea of reprinting. We reprinted, the most important book we reprinted was J.A. Nettleton's book from 1913, The Manufacture of Spirit, which is a very, very important book. Okay. We also reprinted a thing called Reminiscences of a Gauger by a man called Joseph Pacey from the 1870s. We reprinted some of the Barnard pamphlets for Dalmore and other people. So I had been doing a few of those projects with Neil, really just in small runs for the hardcore enthusiast market. And that was quite fun. I then had this idea for 101 Whiskies to Try Before You Die.
Okay.
And bear in mind, my day job, and I had employees to look after and all the rest of it, was running this consultancy business. And I remember sitting with Neil, who was quite a good friend, and saying, look, I've got this idea for 101 Whiskies to Try Before You Die. Do you think you would publish that? I know you published Gavin's books, and he'd written a book himself about island whiskies and so forth. Okay. And Neil, who was a good friend, said to me, "Oh, no, I couldn't publish that. If that's the success I believe it could be, then a small business, we couldn't cope with the cash flow, we couldn't cope with the managing it. It would just be too big a project for us to take on. I couldn't deal with that." And I thought, well, that's the sweetest way of
telling you. Such a nice way of denying you.
Such a nice way of saying your book sucks, really, doesn't it? Rather than a rejection letter, I thought, well, that's fine. There we go. So I forgot about it and just, I just forgot about it. Thought, well, there we go. And then what happened is a rambling story. In oh God, when would it be? In I can't remember when that book first came out. When did that? That's the first edition, by the way. There you go. First edition. That book came out in 2010. There we go. It's 13 years ago. In 2009, it would be a friend of mine, Charlie McLean, who's a friend of mine. I've known Charlie for lots and years and years and years. Charlie had a new book coming out in 2009, and he was presenting it. He was launching it at the Aberdeen Book Festival. And he and his publisher said, well, will you come? Charlie's going to be launching it with a talk and so forth at the Aberdeen Book Festival. Will you come and chair that session? Will you, take the introduce Charlie, do a Q&A with him, do a bit of a reading, and then take any questions from the floor. And if there's no questions, if people are not interested, have a few questions up your sleeve to get the whole thing started. And so they said, well, we don't have any money, can't pay you, but we'll, cover your travel expenses. We'll all go out for a lovely dinner.
Nice.
Charlie's a friend of mine. So I said, yeah, of course, that'd be lovely. So at this point, I haven't got a book out. I've just got that Jurors corporate thing that I'd done. And I had this idea. So we went out, we did that, went out for a lovely dinner. I got talking to that publisher. And at sort of, 1 o'clock in the morning, drink having been taken as it would have been. They said, you should do a book. So I said, I've got this idea for 101 Whiskies to Try Before You Die, but it's not. We'll have that. Said the publisher, was a little company called Berlin, which is a bigger Scottish publisher. It's like the number 2 publisher in Scotland, I suppose. We'll take that. I said, oh, right, okay. Anyway, to cut a long story short, in the end, they didn't take it because their salespeople said there are too many whiskey books. Don't need any more whiskey books. They published some of Charlie's books anyway. There are too many whiskey books. Don't need any more whiskey books. We'll not bother with that. But by that stage, I sort of got my tail up, and we found an agent. My agent went and sold it to Hachette, who are actually a much bigger publisher, Hachette Scotland, and it did really, really well, to everyone's great surprise, I think. And here we are now, 12, 13 years on with the 5th edition. But you see, with a book like that, the publishing industry thinks, and 99% of the time they're right, book like that is essentially, it's a gift book. You'll get 1, maybe 2 Christmases out of it. If it does really well, you'll get a second bite in the second Christmas, and that'll be fantastic, and everyone will be happy, and that'll be wonderful. And that's what we thought we were going to do. So there was never any intention of starting a dynasty.
It did take off, obviously, and all these other books that you have, and they are fantastic gifts, though, because I did get this one.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, that was a lovely
the gift set with the 21-year-old Glenfarclas. It was a beautiful Christmas present. I loved it.
What a great present that. Well, what a great thing. Yeah, Glenfarclas wanted that, and that was
that was from Glenfarclas. Nice.
Yeah, good for Glenfarclas. And of course, they then asked me to do their corporate history, their book, which has actually now gone to a second. We did the first one for their 175th, and then just in the middle of the pandemic. Hang on, I got that here.
And hard to find, Ian. I don't know if that was just in Scotland, Ireland, England, but yeah, I had that. I didn't
That's
have
the-
that.
that's the-
I was looking for that. Couldn't see it anywhere in North America.
No, I wouldn't think it would be.
Okay.
It was really just the distillery's own production, and they put it in their gift shop, and they gift it to people.
Okay. Great
So I
idea.
don't think it didn't have a big sale outside of the distillery, but then it was never intended to do that.
And that was my first introduction to you, was through this.
That's marvelous. Yeah, that was a
number
great thing. That was a great thing. That was so nice that they did that. And like you say, in the little preamble that you flicked up, so it spun off 101 gins, 101 rums. It's been fun. It's been amazing.
And I've got to say, the 101 gins I've never seen, but this is one of the greatest pictures. It's beautiful. So the artwork in there, and this within that book, it's great. And
that 101 gins, which is out of print now, and there's a new gin book that I did. We had this for about 5 years, this incredible gin craze here in the UK, and it's spread out elsewhere, I know, but it was intense here.
Right.
That book sold an immense number of copies very, very quickly, which was great. But it's interesting, you see, the dynamics of the whiskey book market and the whiskey book buyer are actually very different from the dynamic of the gin book market and the gin book buyer.
Okay.
And the gin book buyer is I think much more driven by fun and to a degree frivolity and gifting, and there isn't really much of a hardcore enthusiast, what you might crudely call anorak community interested in gin. So people buy that book once for their their mum, their girlfriend, whatever. Here you go, 101 gins to try before you die. There you go, darling. Happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, when it sold a ton of copies. But that's it. Then they've got a gin book. End of. Don't need any more gin books. We've got a gin book. Done that. Tick. Move on. Whereas the whiskey enthusiast, as proven by the fact that Ingvar Ronde can issue a new malt whiskey yearbook every year. Jim Murray can issue a new book every year. I can get away with a book every 3 years. You have this hardcore enthusiast market who wants to know what's new, what's different, what's happening, what are these new expressions, and they are
World
look
whiskeys.
At the there you go. That's it. Yeah. Look at that. Craft whiskeys, etc. They just have this incredible enthusiasm and passion for knowledge, and they are like a sponge. They just suck up more and more. And the more and more information you give them, the more and more they absorb, and the more and more they process and throw back at you. I used to do, I don't do so many live tastings anymore, but I used to do quite a lot of tastings with a very, very good independent wine merchant who are about 20 miles from my home here. And we do gin tastings. We do gin tastings and we do whiskey tastings. And first of all, the audience was very different. Okay. The audience for a gin tasting would be predominantly female, and they'd be predominantly looking for a bit of fun and a giggle. And the audience for a whiskey tasting would be predominantly male, and they would be much more serious. And then you come to the questions, and there was a very big split. You would get a question in the gin tasting from people genuinely wanted to know what the answer was. They were just looking for some information, and they were interested in what are botanicals and how does this work, or what does London gin mean, or whatever it was. And they would listen to the answer. Half the time, I would get a question in a whiskey tasting, and you knew perfectly well the person asking you knew the answer. And the aim of the question was to catch out the speaker.
Or to prove how brilliant you are to come up with this type of question, right?
Yeah. There was a lot of that. And it's just funny, that as I say, there was a genuine interest for knowledge in some of those gin questions. And there was a genuine attempt to catch me out or to make themselves look good or feel good in front of their buddies in a whiskey tasting. Now, that's a kind of crude simplification, but those two dynamics were very different. And what that means is that the whiskey books tend to have a longer life. They tend to be able to spawn a second, third, fourth edition, as Ingvar Ronde knows well, as Jim Murray knows well. and all to the good for all of us. Whereas the gin books are like, right, got a gin book, thank you, that's it, that's the end, thank you. So there we go.
Is the responding to people on the side? It's are these available in Alberta?
Well, some of them should be on the dreaded Amazon. They've got them all, or they should have them all.
There's some that we can't get, and things that I've tried, but all the 101 books that you have, you're on the 2nd edition of the Craft and World. We're on the 5th edition of yours right now, the 101 Whiskies, and and sorry, we're on the 1st edition of, and I can't remember the name of it. The ones where you might never possibly taste ever.
I know the name of that.
Oh, I've got it here. That's a subsequent question. There we go. The legendary whiskeys.
There it is.
You know what? I'm going to ask you a question in relation to these 2 books, though, because I truly did enjoy this book. I loved it. I really did. One of my favorite books.
Thank you.
And I like stories, and really this and Pip Hill's book that I interviewed Pip Hills last year. One of my favorite books, and same type of thing. It's the stories that introduce the notions that you're trying to get across. But I want to know, what's the thought process, the research process? Can you compare and contrast them between these 2 types of books for me?
Yeah, well, the format, of course, tells you part of the thing. I mean, if we just open 101 Whiskies at random, there's the page spread. Yeah. And if we open it to another page, gosh, oh, look, it's a Canadian one. Look, same format. And if we open it at another page. So this is, although I say it myself, it's quite formulaic, really. It fits to a pattern, and that pattern was set way back in 2010. You know, we got the left-hand page, you've got a picture of the bottle, so you know what it is you're looking for, and some basic information there about the price band and the ownership and the website address and all that sort of basic stuff you need to know. And then on the facing page, it's between 350 and 400 words of commentary. End of. And then we get another one of those, another one of those, and then you end up with 101 of them.
The history part's what I love the most, though. I've got to tell you that, where you go into the history and you always have a personal snippet as well. Try to. So it's not the picture and something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I try to throw extra stuff in. We'll talk about this later, I'm sure. I mean, there are very few, increasingly few personal tasting notes. There are never any scores. I'm throwing it out there and saying, you know, you decide. I don't know what your budget is. I don't know what whiskeys you've got. I don't know what you like. I don't know where you've been on your whiskey journey and where you should go. But you know what? Here's 101 ideas that aren't going to break the bank. Whereas, by contrast, I mean, this is a very different book. It's just a book with lots of words, and it tells stories. And it's a story about, it's a little bit story about me, and a little bit about how I grew up and living in Scotland as a kid and all the rest of it, and the holidays we took, with a loose thread of gold, and the thread of gold is the whiskies of the island distilleries. And why the island distilleries? Well, because as a kid, we used to go to the islands an awful lot on holiday. Not that I was drinking whiskey. And because there is a huge interest in island whiskies as a particular category. So it seemed a nice way of putting those 2 things together, telling some stories, both personal stories and whiskey anecdotes, which people may or may not know, and stringing that together in a sort of semi autobiographical way.
And let's focus a little bit on 101, because we're going back and forth, and I hope I'm not confusing people out there, and especially you. But this, and let's do a couple quotes. So this is one of them. This is on the jacket of 101. So it says, "This is a guide to the 101 whiskeys that enthusiasts must seek out and try in order to complete their whiskey education. And I like that. So that's on the jacket. And this is a further one. And this is a longer quote. I'm sorry, but I like it. So I'm going to do the whole thing. And though it goes without saying, must be a reason for their inclusion. Mostly it's because they're very, very good examples of their kind. Sometimes they deserve your support for other reasons. Sometimes it will be because they are made by small distillers swimming against the tide of corporate ubiquity. I like that part. But it might just be because a particular whiskey is simply so unusual that you just have to try it. That might mean reminding you of something familiar that you knew about but had sort of forgotten. Hopefully, more often, this will point you to something new, unexpected, and surprising. Above all, this book is about whiskeys to drink, not collect. And that not collect part is very important for a further question I have. So there's a couple questions that are born from these two quotes. So what do you mean by most well-rounded possible? Are you talking about regions, profiles, cost structures? What do you mean by most well-rounded possible?
Where did that come in? Did I say that?
Oh, sorry, it's another part of the jacket. I didn't put that quote up.
Oh, yeah, right. How the publishing industry works is the publishers write the jackets.
Okay.
you don't get to see too much about the jacket until they send it to you, and they go, "Here's a jacket. What do you think?" And you go, "Well, I think this, I think that." Oh, well, we're about to print it anyway. So
too late.
They
thank you for your input.
They consult you, but it's a pretty arbitrary sort of process. So they will write stuff. Sometimes you're like, "Oh, really?" I'm a bit embarrassed by that. What do I mean? Well, we want it to be you want any book like that to be reasonably well balanced, to have as broad an appeal as possible. If I just wrote about the whiskies I particularly like, and because I do try and put in there whiskies which I know to be good, I know to be excellent of their type, which appeal to a particular strand of whiskey opinion and whiskey drinking, which personally just don't do it that much for me. And this is partly why there are no scores. If I just put all the whiskies which would score very highly in my tasting personal opinion, then some really interesting and different whiskies that other people will enjoy and that perhaps they should try wouldn't be in there. So the philosophy on this has probably evolved over the 12 years of the book. And I'm a bit more militant about it now, saying, look, what I think, what score I give, whether I give something, 8.5 points or whatever it might be, is not really important. Not really important. You've bought the book, and only you know what your taste is. Your taste might be for really robust whiskies. You might really prefer heavily sherried whiskies. You might prefer really peated whiskies. I don't know. I don't know how many whiskies you've tried. I don't know how many whiskies you're going to try. I don't know what your budget is. And, that seems to be increasingly important. So all I can do is say, look, here are some interesting and different things. Some I like, some just don't work quite as well for me. But don't take my word for it. The only word I would ask you to take is, listen, it's interesting and different, and you might enjoy it. Go try for yourself. And you held up the Aeneas MacDonald book from 1930, and there's there we go, and that's a first edition. That's lovely.
I'm sure it's a fake. I'm sure it's a fake, but just because of how the papers look. But I was happy to have it, and it's written all over.
I don't know that it's ever been pirated by anybody.
Really? No, maybe.
Oh, that's the Jewers one, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Jewers edition. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I thought you had a first edition from 1930 there.
I've been looking, but no.
they are very hard to find now. They only ever printed. We don't know how many they sold, but they only ever printed 1,600 copies of that book.
Really?
From the Porpoise Press. And for a long time, you would pick it up in junk shops or secondhand bookshops very, very cheaply. I mean, I think I paid about £10 or something many years ago for my edition. And now by a fortuitous set of circumstances, I actually own the copyright for it, which is ridiculous. But
Nice. Good for you.
Now I think you'd pay £200 or £300 for a nice first edition. But there were only 1,600 copies. You'll have to go on, the antiquarian book sites, Dolphin. You can still find them, but I'm sorry, the price has shot up now.
I have, but it's not 200 and 300. It's 1,500 Canadian, essentially, is what we're looking at for several.
Is it? Wow.
Very, very expensive. And I'm a teacher, Ian. I'm a teacher. I'd love to have every book I ever see, but
oh, tell me. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, isn't it? That's a lot of money.
For me. Yep.
Anyway, so what were we talking about?
Well, you avoided the deliberately obscure. I even have the deliberately obscure, the ridiculously limited, and the absurdly expensive.
The expensive. Well, there you go. That tells it, doesn't it? What is the point of looking clever and good by drinking some these days, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pound bottle of whiskey, of which there are only ever 217 bottles released to the world, and they've all been bought up long before the book appears anyway. So, do you want to look like some kind of smart aleck, or do you want to actually offer some hopefully helpful or interesting advice to people?
And you're drinking one right now. So we one that belongs in this book, that is in the book. Can you explain what you have? Because you have a Glenmorangie.
I've got just an absolutely standard, everyday, the standard starter Glenmorangie. I brought that out really tonight.
Perfect.
Because that was the first really serious corporate job I had, although it didn't last very long. That was
you did well with the two things that I said. You came up with the cast strength, and then your suggestion to buy that distillery. I think someone somewhere is kicking themselves at one point.
Somebody bought it. Actually, I've got it here. I keep it on my shelf to honor it. Oh,
is that the bottle?
That is the bottle that we're talking about.
That incredibly hard to find. Holy, nice, excellent.
Yeah, wrap round label. Wrote the copy for that. Actually,
thank you for that. And what was the percentage? What was the cast strength in there? What's the?
Well, they were all individual casts. This particular one is 57.2.
Okay.
And this is April 83. It was distilled, bottled November 93.
And did you have them in batches? Did you say batch 1, 2? How did you distinguish between them? Or was it just the ABV?
It gives a bottle number and it gives the cask number. So how, each individual cask is different. Really, what inspired this? You talked about Pip Hills a minute ago. Pip's a great guy. At the time this came out, this would be 1989, 1990. This would have been released, something like that. This is a later bottling from 93. But we launched this in 1990, 1991, something like that. At that time, the whiskey industry really hated the Scotch Malt Whisky Society.
Which is too bad. Look at the beautiful bottles. Pip was great. I don't know.
Yeah, he was a great guy, but he's an absolute renegade. Mad as a box of frogs, really. Pip, lovely guy, love him to death. And what he did was completely heretical. The industry didn't like it at all. The industry wanted to talk still then about blends for the most part. There were a couple of people talking about malts, but mostly the industry wanted to talk about blends. Mostly the industry didn't want to see their bottles being released under the distillery name. And a lot of people really disliked what he was doing. I thought it was, sorry, Joe, I have an advanced publication signed. Nice.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off of your. I'll try to limit doing those, but it is pretty impressive.
I'm pretty impressed, but I'm pretty impressed by that. A signed advanced copy, nice.
So Pip Hills gets you on this, and had you heard of Pip Hills?
So I was inspired. I was inspired by what they were doing, and I was inspired by the consumer reaction to it. And at that time, I knew the late, he's died now, obviously, the late Michael Jackson. I knew Michael pretty well because I had known him from working in the brewing industry, and that's where he'd made his name. And I'd known him from the real ale movement. And I remember talking to Michael about the idea of this and saying, wouldn't it be great if you know, the idea was, wouldn't it be great if people could just creep into the distillery warehouse and tap a cask and draw off a bottle, but know exactly what it is they're getting, as opposed to this slightly clandestine feel of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, where the distillery almost is shamefaced about it, and it would just rather see a number on the bottle, and the industry is rather po-faced about it. There must be people out there who would be madly enthusiastic to have this, and Michael was very, very supportive of the idea. So we developed it and launched it as a native Glenmorangie Rocher. Not long afterwards, after I left the company, they then delisted it, which was a shame, but they didn't really understand a lot of the things I'd been doing, sadly. But I was always very proud to do that. That was a great thing to have. And they come up in auction sites occasionally. They come up in auction sites.
Far beyond what this teacher can pay for them. But it's the fantastic, the notion, the first of it is really impressive. I like that. When you come up with things like that, when you taste them, because you have the opportunity to taste so many different whiskeys in your position, especially with Whiskey Magazine and the judging you do with World Whiskeys, do you keep a list for every type of book that you have? So when you have one, you're thinking this is a world whiskey book, this is a craft whiskey book, this is a 101 legendary whiskey item. Do you keep
yes, but in fairness, I should say I haven't really written for Whiskey Magazine or done World Whiskey Award tastings for many years now.
Really? Oh, I thought you're still involved. Okay, thank you.
The Whiskey Magazine, no, and no, not. I haven't written for them for a long time. Nor have I been on, not really on any tasting panels. Again,
you're too busy writing.
Sorry?
You're too busy writing.
No, well, that would be nice. But mainly, I would rather leave that to the real experts, the people who actually distill things. Always, I find myself suffering a bit from imposter syndrome, and I sit in a tasting panel with real experts.
I think people would say the same thing when they're sitting next to you, though. It's like, do I know as much as this guy? I feel a little bit.
I don't know. I always felt a bit of a bit of an imposter, really, if you're sitting in a tasting panel and I don't know, Jim McEwen is there or Richard Patterson or whatever, and you think, these guys make it. They live and breathe it. I just write about it. I'm not sure if I'm really qualified to. So I've pulled back from all that tasting panel work for quite a few years ago now.
Okay.
It also ties into the philosophical thought of there not being any scores, of there not being any personal tasting notes of any degree. It's all about saying, well, look, I can point you at this, I can point you at that, but it's up to you. It's up to you. And there are lots of people eminently qualified, far more highly qualified than me to do tasting panels and to award prizes and
Ian, if you ever want to do a tasting panel and have me there with you, I would be more than happy to be on any tasting panel with you, John. I'm going to talk about this book just a little bit of the research. And what I mean by research is looking at the ones that I don't have, and would like. So I've got 53 that you have in the book. There's 22 that I have from a different edition or different year. There's 12 that I do not have that are in my market that I'll probably buy at one point in time. There's 14, that's the red ones up here. The 14 that are not my market and I have not seen them before. And those are the most impressive for me because I like to see certain ones. They come up. And although you're not on social media, I am quite a bit. And I tend to see the whiskeys that are coming out, but I didn't take note of those right there. So the 12. And 14, I should say. And these ones down here, the pink ones, are 13 from distilleries that you mentioned in Whiskies Galore. And I find this interesting because that means 10% of, just over 10% of the whiskeys in your Whiskies to Try Before You Die are from the islands, and it would seem that it seemed that since you wrote Whiskies Galore, a tour of Scotland's island distilleries, you have a particular love of islands. And I'm just wondering if maybe because you met the owners, the distillery managers, the head distillers, that maybe they kind of imprinted a place in your heart and maybe they influenced you a little bit. Is that it, maybe?
Well, I guess that could well be true. I do have even before we get onto island distilleries, I mean, I'm rather fond of islands.
Okay.
I don't think I could really live on an island, curiously enough, but I love going to islands. I love visiting islands. And that's right from childhood. It was always the sort of family holiday was on an island, whether it was we went a lot to Arran, we went to Skye, we went to Harris, Lewis, etc. Lots and lots of islands in my childhood. So that sort of, there's the imprinting, if you will. Long before I was interested in whiskies, I got interested in islands. So but you must be right that the more you get to know the people, the more you meet them and engage with them and hear their stories. So that compels you to be more engaged with them.
Well, it helps me. I do tasting, so I'm president of the Alberta Scotch Society, and we do tasting. So most of the things I do in my spare time, I think of tastings. But I've met quite a few distillers and distillery owners, and they do imprint on me. I need a story. I need a connection to want to continue. I'll taste your whiskey. I'll love it. But if I have that connection, I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to keep coming back. And I think you've done the same thing with distillery tours. You helped several distilleries with their, I don't know what to call it, their not their marketing store, with their what do you call it? At the end of the tour, you go into their,
well, there's the brand home, or there's brand home, or there's a tasting bar, and there's always a shop, of course, because these things have got to pay their way. So yeah, there's always a shop. Exit via gift shop, of course, as they say.
Yeah. Well, here's my quote I'm going to have with it. I'll do it. Never forget that a bottle sold through the distillery shop is not only the most profitable bottle and distiller will ever sell, but emotionally builds a link between purchaser, brand, and distillery, the significance of which cannot be understated. And I agree with that. And I wanted to know if it influenced you, because I know it would have influenced me. But I'm easily influenceable. But you've been to a lot more distilleries, so I didn't know if that maybe doesn't have a pull on you anymore because you've been to so many.
No, I still love going to distilleries. I still do. It was one of the great frustrations in putting this 5th edition together, because it was mainly put together, during the pandemic with all the lockdowns. It just wasn't possible to go and see people. Now, obviously, what had arisen is this the Zoom, Microsoft meetings, and this, I can't remember what this is called, this other stream, but this opportunity to do video conversations with people, and for the most part, they're incredibly reliable and free. I mean, it's incredible what you would have paid for video conferencing facility, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, now comes for free, and you can put it on your phone. So that's extraordinary. But it has been a huge frustration during that 2 years effective of lockdown, when it just wasn't possible. And yeah, you're right. Well, at least this is what I wrote, that a bottle, and this is what, again, going back to my consulting days, trying to impress on people when they were building a brand home or a visitor center or whatever they cared to call it, that bottle they were selling was first of all, it was immensely profitable, because not only were they getting their own distiller's margin, they were getting the wholesale margin and the retail margin, and they didn't have to discount it or make any special offering. So they were selling it at full price and taking all the money. So it's a wonderful.
Still paying tax, but
all the money that there was to take, whether it was a retailer's share of the profit or the wholesaler or the distributor, they were all making profit all through that value chain. Well, now the distillery got all that money because they were able to sell it at full retail, but not have to pay people in the chain. So from a pure accountancy point of view, it was a fabulous sale. And the money was, instant cash flow, really, off the bottling line into the distillery shop, and ka-ching, bank the money. But much more important than that was the fact that you built that emotional link. Now, it's the same with a lot of products. If you went to go and meet an interesting cheesemaker and you tried their fantastic cheese, or you went to a winery, or you went to whatever it is, a farm shop, and you bought the wonderful steak from the cows which were grazing in the field, or you bought that beautiful cheese,
or the jam,
or the honey, exactly. Or cheese is good. You go and meet the person who's made that cheese, and you hear the story of the cheese, and you have a look into the dairy and see how the cheese is made. Well, that's pretty compelling. And when you get home, you've got friends around for supper, or you've got family around for dinner or whatever. You go, try some of this fantastic cheese. We were just at the cheesemaker. We met the cheesemaker. Do you know that it takes 9 months for this cheese to mature? And, they have to wash the rind in wine, or whatever it might be, whatever the story is. There's some rich, compelling story. And that cheese is more. It costs you more than the cheese you just bought in the supermarket. But it tastes so much better, and you feel better about it. So you have that fantastic emotional connection. And of course, these days, with the internet, that cheese factory, that cheese dairy has got a website. You think, I really like that cheese. So back you go to the website and you buy some more cheese, or you go to your local cheesemonger and you go, I tried this fantastic cheese when we were on holiday. Have you got any of this?
Anything like it.
Anything like it. And so that bottle, it works exactly the same. And it's no surprise, all these little gin distilleries which have sprung up in recent years.
Here too.
Going to the distillery, meeting the distiller, tasting it there, and taking away a bottle is a big, big part of their business plan.
How has that changed over the years? Because in Whiskies Galore, you talk about going to Arran, and how you popping up at the distillery was regarded as very poor form or poor etiquette. How have things changed?
Well, it has changed. It has changed enormously. I mean, when we're going back to, so when you go back to the 80s and 90s when I started in the industry, apart from Glenfiddich, really, I don't think at that time anyone had much of a visitor center operation to speak of. And certainly, if I was, in the marketing department, running the marketing department in Glenmorangie, as I did in those days, and I wanted to go to the distillery for whatever reason, or to Glenmurray, which we owned in those days, you pretty much had to sort of apply to the production department and say to them, look, I need to go to the distillery next week. And so, well, why? What are you doing there? Why do you want to go there? What are you doing? And they would be sort of suspicious. And if, for a long time, there was a big resistance to letting people through the doors. And it was only when Glenfiddich pioneered it. And it took a long time after Glenfiddich had opened, and I think Glenfarclas opened as well, for other people to go, well, okay, we can let the public in. We could do that. And people, they were very suspicious about that for a long, long time. They thought it would be very disruptive. They couldn't. A lot of people would say, well, why would anyone be interested? Why would they want to come to our distillery? And now I can think of extreme examples like Kavalan in Taiwan, because it's absolutely enormous, the tourism operation there. I don't know what's happening at the moment, of course, because their relationships with China are, shall we say, tense. But at one time, and again pre-pandemic, and again, China's suffering enormously from the pandemic right now. So I don't know about Chinese tourism, but at one time pre-pandemic, they were getting around about 1 million visitors a year, mainly from mainland China to Taiwan. And I mean, the Kavalan distillery is some distance from Taipei. You've got to make quite an effort to get there. And 1 million people a year were coming to visit it.
And we could safely say 1 million bottles sold then.
Oh, for sure.
I would buy more than one, but I'm sure some might not buy one. But
many people will buy multiple bottles and take them home, of course, and talk about them and go looking for them. Once that bottle's drunk, they go looking for them, don't they? They go to their off license wherever and try and buy more. So it's a great thing. But it is a relative, for people. For a younger generation of whiskey enthusiasts who take it absolutely for granted that they can just rock up at the door and pay their $10 or $100 or whatever it is for whichever experience they want, they take that absolutely for granted. It's a relatively new phenomenon.
And one that I hope continues, but
I think absolutely it will. Absolutely it will, Dolph. They're making far too much money. Not to carry. They're doing perfectly well.
Let's stick with Arran, because when you're with Arran, and I've got a bottle of Arran now, and you credit Ralfie, and this is part of the book that I really love, the fact that you demonstrate in the book how people can grow. And you, and not the bigger one, we're going to talk about Islay in a second, but Arran, you weren't impressed with Arran whatsoever. You read some, or you watched some Ralfie videos, vlogs, or whatever you want to call it, and your opinion changed slightly about that. So, has it still changed, or are there other ones that have changed even more because of maybe these books, and you had the chance to come back to something 15 years later?
Yeah, well, Arran is a good example. And I went back and thought again about Arran because of Ralphie's incredible enthusiasm for it. And I remember thinking, watching his video piece on Arran, and thought to myself, God, you know what? I wrote that off 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I haven't drunk or tried that whiskey in 15. What am I doing? How can I call myself a whiskey writer if, oh God, I better try it. And I tried it and thought, oh my God, wow. Yeah, it has improved. I mean, it wasn't very good 15, 20 years ago, let's be honest. But
this one is. So, and this being a single cask, that's why I like. You can tell by single cask and the other things, but this one, lovely.
No, I'm so happy to put my hands up and say, you know what, I neglected that when perhaps I shouldn't have done. I let it slip, and something drew my attention to it. Another good example, actually, is a completely mainstream dominant whiskey, and that's Johnny Walker Black Label.
Okay.
I had made my mind up some years ago that I didn't really like Johnny Walker Black Label. Just sort of, that's it. I know about Johnny Walker. Don't tell me about Johnny Walker. I know about Johnny Walker Black Label. It was just too strong, too smoky. I didn't like it. And you know what? I went back to try it more recently and went, wow, this is really very good. Either I've changed, or it's changed, or maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe a bit of both. But actually, do you know what? Did I put it? I better quickly look. Did I put it in the book? I better quickly check. Yes, there it is.
It's there. Johnny Walker Black.
There it is. There it is. And
number. Sorry. Well, Arran is in the book as well. Arran's number 6 now.
It is. It is.
Johnny Walker. What number is Johnny Walker? For those that want to.
56. Black Label's 56.
Done. Yeah. Now I agree with you with Johnny Walker, but not black. I'm the opposite. I didn't find it smoky enough. And then with the double black, that's where I was kind of brought back into the fold with Johnny Walker.
Well, if you're into smoky, double black is the way to go. Absolutely. No, I'm just, you were talking about do people grow? Do people change? Do you have to recognize that your opinion has evolved and you might have been wrong before? Well, yeah, I was wrong about Arran, or maybe I wasn't wrong then, but I was wrong to ignore it for so long.
But you admitted it, and you're willing to change with the times, right?
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite right. Well, if you can't, double black. It's a. If you like that style of whiskey, then you're gonna love it.
Is trek through Arran, especially about their port. And Arran, I'm sure I haven't been to the islands, and I really admired you going through the islands. I really wanted to go through the islands, and always will, I think, until I finally get there. But sorry, we're trying to take these off one comment.
Yeah, you've got to take some time and do that. Because you would really love it. You would really enjoy it. And there's a lot to see and explore on the Hebrides alone, let alone going on up to Orkney. But I mean, it's expensive. It's expensive and time consuming.
It is. And well, if you read your book, you're not going in the summer because you didn't enjoy going in the summer. But
well, I didn't enjoy going to the Islay festival. It just was. Yes. I was completely swamped by it, and I thought, no, I can't go. Yeah, so many people, and one of the things that appealed to me about islands, particularly these Hebrides, is just the isolation,
which some people would obviously love. And you talk about that too. You have or managers who don't live on the island, or they do, but they're home and their wives on different islands as well. So I think I would go there immediately. If I had tickets tomorrow, I think I would take the time off. Tell me about this book. Where's the impetus for this book? Are these your ideas that you kind of shoot off of people and it develops over time, or is it someone at this publishing house saying Islay or islands are very popular right now, I think you should write a book? Where's that?
The genesis of that book was somewhere between those. It was a conversation with that publisher. I had done the gin book with them, and it had done very, very well. And they were saying, well, and they do publish a lot of distinctly Scottish books. Mm-hmm. Not in a parochial sense, but that's the particular speciality. And they were obviously aware that island whiskies were particularly hot and had a particular enthusiast basis. So they said to me, well, are you interested in doing a book about island whiskies? And I said, yes, I am, because I have this long family personal association with them, and my wife and I will still go there for holidays. Quite recently we were on Mull, for example, for a pure holiday, which was beautiful. I said, but I don't want to write, the normal, in quotes, whiskey book.
Right.
I want to make it more personal. I want to make it more anecdotal. And they said, well, let's see what that would be like.
Okay.
And I wrote a couple of chapters for them, and they go, okay, that's not really what we were expecting, but it is interesting and different. So yeah, let's go with that. So that's what I wrote.
Now, will they give you the chance to visit the islands? Will they give you an all-expense paid holiday essentially through the islands as you're doing this? Or is this all on your dime, Ian?
No, I wish. I wish. No, I mean... no, basically.
just
no.
Okay. I've got another quote here. Let's pull this up.
No, but having said that, no, they don't. But it's fair to say that not all, because I didn't ask all of them, but a number of distilleries, were generous in support, because it's expensive to put a thing like this together. And to be honest, however successful that is, and it's been reasonably successful, it doesn't sell. It's not a J.K. Rowling. It doesn't sell thousands and thousands of copies. It's not a what's that? Spare. It's not a spare. So sometimes you've got to ask for a bit of help. And at the end of the book here, I say getting to and from Scotland's islands is expensive and time consuming. So I'm appreciative of the financial or in-kind support received, some of the costs of travel and accommodation. So I've listed a number who helped out, and they're credited there. Sometimes they've got corporate houses, that you can stay in their house, or they'll put you up in a local hotel, or they'll contribute towards the ferry cost or whatever it might be. And a few of the people in there generously supported it. They weren't looking for particularly favorable or glowing mentions. There was no pressure to say, well, you must be nice about us. It's just like, yeah, we realize the problem. We'd like you to visit. We'll chuck in a hotel night. And was that the sort of level it worked out. But no, publishers, no, I'm sorry to say, there just isn't enough money in it, Dolph, is the honest answer.
So it's not as glamorous as I imagine, really, because my imagining is like, oh, what a fantastic job. You get to travel continually, try whiskeys, you're wined, you're dined in. Fantastic. But I'm going to tell you one other thing.
It's better than yeah.
Well, sorry, I just want to say one other thing I really love about this book is the honesty, the vulnerability you relay throughout the Whiskies Galore. You do, and you hold an opinion that's not. It wouldn't be the same opinion as maybe most whiskey drinkers at the time, and the quote is this: "Peaty whiskeys and me don't really get along. In truth, I find quite a lot of what's made here." Islay at the time, uncomfortably hard to drink. I can't honestly say that I greatly enjoy them, and I'll happily put the glass aside in favor of something smoother and more mellow. And that's on page 69. So this is a difficult opinion to have, but you relay it in here, and I like that. And again, why I like the book. But there's a juxtaposition too, because you mentioned this, you don't like them, but within this book, they're front and center. They're in there. You've got Ardbeg 10, number 5, Bowmore 15, 17, Kalila 20, Highland Park 49, Holman 59. It goes on and on.
Yeah, so, they're in there. Well, we can't all like and enjoy the same thing. Thank God we don't, because one of the great joys about whiskey. Well, we talked earlier. I've written books about rum. I've written several books about gin, and I've written a number of books about whiskey. Now, the great thing to me about whiskey, compared to so we've got gin, which has like a flavor. We've got vodka, right, which is like a flavor spectrum here, like a 0. And then we've got gin, which has got an interesting and bigger flavor spectrum, and then we've got rum, which has a bigger and interesting flavor spectrum, and then we've got whiskey, which has got the most extraordinarily wide,
way out there. Yeah,
way out there. So that's one of the things that makes that category interesting and sexy and exciting, and continues to be interesting and sexy and involving.
So maybe you haven't changed your mind about them, but you recognize their importance within.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. We can't all enjoy the same thing, and it would be very boring and very dull if we did all enjoy the same thing. And it would be very boring and dull if whiskey had a flavor spectrum like that.
Yes.
So I look at that and I go, well, look, peaty whiskies don't really do it for me. That doesn't mean to say they're bad. It just means to say I don't particularly like peaty whiskey. But, and you rightly point out, there are some peaty whiskies, some really quite peaty whiskies in 101, but I know them to be very well made. I know them to be good examples of that style. And I want people to say, like, you should, if you like peaty whiskies, you're going to like this. Try these. Don't do it for me, but there you go. Some people like chicken and some people like steak.
And some of us liking all of it, and that's me. But.
Yeah, and some people don't like chicken or steak at all, and they just eat fish. So that doesn't mean to say they're right or wrong. It just means they prefer fish to chicken.
Right. And I've really got 2 big questions for you still, and I'm wondering if you want me to ask them now or if I should in the future, because one deals with the pens and ink, which I love, and I need an elaboration on the pens and ink. And the other one would be about other authors that have written there. So I'm wondering, do you want to continue this later, or could I ask these questions now? Do you still have energy? Are you still hyped up?
Yeah, we're still good. We're still good for what is it? Wow, hour and a quarter. Who knew?
I could talk to you for hours, kind sir.
Oh dear me, don't say that. Yeah, pens. Just like I kind of got into the pen thing when I was in the book talking about collecting.
Okay.
And the other side of collecting with whiskey at the moment is investing. So I want to be clear that I don't have an issue with people who collect things, right? I collect things. I've got lots and lots of books about whiskey. I collect lots of books about whiskey. Here's an amazing thing I just bought. This is one of the rarest books you'll ever see. It's a Alfred Barnard, right?
Yes. And
he was commissioned to write different pamphlets about people.
Yes.
And that's an actual first edition from 1890s, whatever. him writing about Patterson's. Incredibly rare. Incredibly
is there more
rare.
than 6? I was thinking there was only 6, but maybe
no.
not.
There are actually 7. I've written somewhere that there were 6, but subsequent to writing that, I've discovered a 7th. In addition to the ones that we know about, that I've written about, because I did do a reprint of that book once years ago. I did a reprint of that, so that's why I was really keen to buy the first edition, which is desperately rare. How sad am I? He's also written, which nobody ever knew. He also wrote about Glenkinchie, believe it or not. Did a pamphlet for them. I never knew that, and I found that out a year or so ago.
Just recently. Okay.
Just recently. So yeah, I don't have an issue with collecting, right? So we need to be clear about collecting and investment.
You say that right away on page 4. I can read it. I'm going to read it. I despair of the whiskey investment hucksters. So you don't like them. You really don't. And I fear the craze will end badly. However, I understand the urge of the collector. I have lots of pens, more pens than strictly speaking I need. But the difference is that I wrote this book with them. The book features aficionados, collectors, and obsessives. And I, in my own small way, am one of them. And why pens and ink specifically? Because you make a link in every chapter with the pens and ink that's been used. And I found it really interesting, especially from someone who didn't really know until about 6 months ago that collecting pens and different types of inks is really a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. Why?
Where did it stem? Did you get a fantastic pen?
I honestly don't know if I could answer that. There was, in the original draft of the book, there was a great deal more about pens and the business of writing and penmanship and ink. And the editor insisted on taking most of it out. This is a whiskey book.
Well, now you can tell them that someone said they would have really liked to have seen that. So
I think there should be more, because I was trying to make the point to them. There was a sort of a metaphor almost about the business of just getting obsessed, mildly obsessed about things that you really shouldn't get obsessed about. Why should you get obsessed about whiskey? Why get obsessed about pens and ink? It's pretty strange, really, when you think about it. But I thought there was a crossover there, and I thought people who might be interested in buying better than average whiskies might be interested in better than average. And I thought it was quite fun to find an ink which echoed the character. There's quite a nice one that echoed the character of Harris and Lewis. It's Harris and Lewis. You've never been there, you explain it, but for people who haven't been there, Harris and Lewis are very, very rocky islands, very, very thin soil cover, and you have a lot of granite, strange type of granite that sticks through, and it defines the landscape. And when the sunlight hits it, particularly when the sun is low, you get strange glinting colors out of this steely gray rock. Okay. And I actually found an ink which actually had little flakes of metal in the ink. So when you write with it, and then you get your page of script, and you tilt it against the light, you get little glints coming off it, and it just reminded me very much of the landscape on Islay. And I got some lovely brown ink to write about peaty whiskies, because I thought, this is nice. If I dipped my ink in a peat bog, if I dipped my pen in a peat bog, it would come out all kind of brown. And so I found some brown ink. And so
red ink for Jura?
Red ink was for Jura. Red ink was for Jura. I thought, I got it into my head, I don't know why, I thought Jura was kind of quite a red island. It was about the red deer that roam all over Jura. When you get off the ferry, there's a little 6-boat ferry that takes you over from Islay to Jura. And very often there'll be red deer right down by the little landing spot, and you drive this ridiculous single track road up to Craighouse, and there are deer on either side of the road everywhere. It's covered. I mean, there are, I don't know, 200 people and 6,000 deer or something. It's ludicrous. So these are red deer, magnificent looking things. And then there was the whole red thing about burning. There was the K Foundation burning £1 million in the boathouse, some Jura house. And it just popped to my head to go, this is a red island. I'm going to write with red ink. So that whole chapter was written with red ink.
Which is what makes this very unique as a book, right? That's what.
Well, I don't think anyone.
It's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, great. I love it. Yeah, I love it. I don't think anyone else writes about the ink and the pen they use. And there was a lot more. There was a lot more about pens and inks, but the editor insisted that they would come out.
Well, you know, edition 2, if it comes out, you can add that in there and
put that all back in.
Like say, I have to have it. If you want edition 2, that ink story is going
the
back
pens and the ink have got to go back in. Oh God! Right?
It's an extra paragraph, maybe 2 in every chapter.
That's what it was. It was like a couple of paragraphs in every chapter.
See,
out they go, or the editor took them out. That's what happens. There we go. Yeah, thank you for that, Dolph. Yeah,
well, you deserve it, and I deserve to read it. Tell them that too.
You deserve it.
So the next question, let's go. Let's stick with Islay, the brown ink of Islay, and it's not about the whiskeys, but rather about the whiskey books coming out of Islay. So, and here I've got another quote. I do have lots of quotes. I'm sorry. I do like that though, but you know, it gives people a little glimpse into how well you write as well. So after looking at them for a while, the whiskey books, I made a decision about all those books about Islay. I could read them for research, and they do look lovely, but that seemed like quite hard work. And in the end, and there's the honesty part I liked a lot. And in the end, I put them all back on the shelf. They're there now, staring rather moodily at me and emitting a sort of smoky resentment. So this is a fantastic paragraph for one. And so you seem to have a love-hate relationship with other Islay books or other authors, which I think I picked up within there. But I'm wondering if this is born out of a type of competition or just the sheer magnitude of the amount of books on Islay that you just didn't want to ingest all of them before doing this book.
Well, not. You've probably gathered from 101 and from some of the other stories in Whiskies Galore. Not everything I do is it's entirely serious. It's not everything I write has to be taken entirely at face value. Sometimes I've got an ironic or a sardonic hat on. But yeah, lots of people have written lots of books about Islay, and it was just one of the things I wanted to comment on introducing the idea of Islay. Because out of all of the islands, it's the big dog, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
it's the big dog, and it wasn't always thus. It's not so very long ago that the Islay was dying. It was on its knees. It was in terrible shape. So it's interesting that something about that island captivates people. And there are a mass of books, and some of them are genuinely very good. They're all been written with great enthusiasm and commitment. Some of them are enormously detailed. I wanted to have a little bit of fun with that, but also genuinely, I didn't want to read them or reread them because I've read them when they came out years ago. I didn't really want to reread them and revisit them because I didn't want to be unduly influenced by them.
Okay.
I didn't want to be. I wanted to put my take on it, but acknowledge that there are a whole bunch of books out there from the really quite detailed, slightly obsessive books about Port Ellen, for
Flora
example,
and fauna, and
through to that's my wife calling me for dinner. Through to some of the novels that have been written about Islay and Jura, and they're just works of fiction. But if I think I say at one point, if you read some of the books about Islay, you'd think it was a sort of cross between downtown Arkansas and Chicago or something. It sounds kind of
metropolitan, but not yeah.
Yeah. So I was having partly a bit of fun at the expense of my fellow authors, partly acknowledging that I didn't want to be overly influenced by what other people had written. I just wanted to give my take on it, but just salute and signal. A lot of people have a lot to say about this island in particular.
Thank you, and I'm going to honor your wife. So, Lindsay, calling you. I'll put on my very last question. So there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
This is the final quote. I promise.
Yes.
There are several thousand whiskeys out there, perhaps 10,000. No one really knows. So as the old joke would have it, it's tough work, but someone has to do it. I've picked 101 for you to enjoy, saving you hours of joyless labor. You don't have to thank me. Buying the book will do just fine. So how do people purchase the 5th edition of 101 whiskeys to try before you die? Would you rather they go to a website, or do they just go wherever they can for this one right there?
Well, you always support your local bookstore. First and foremost, if you go to your local bookstore and quote it, and if you can, make sure you tell them it's the 5th edition. They will order that up for you. There are stocks there in North America. I know that for sure. Yes. If your local bookstore doesn't have it, or isn't able to get it, or doesn't want to help you, then a well-known online retailer will have it at your door within a day or two.
Starts with an A. Yeah.
It starts with an A, and something to do with a river in South America. A well-known online bookstore. They will deliver it to you, and they will do a jolly fine job. But first and foremost, if you have a local bookstore in your town, an independent, or a Barnes and Nobles, or whoever it might be, get in there and support a local bookseller.
Perfect. Yes, and on that note, thank you very much. So in conclusion, that's all the time we have today, Whiskey brothers, sisters, and friends. And we did very well. We did almost an hour and a half talking to this lovely man, and you, I couldn't be happier doing it. So this has been a fantastic morning for me, hopefully a fantastic evening for you. Thank you to our listeners who joined us today and who will do so in the future. Thank you as well. A special thanks to Mr. Ian Buxton for and you know what? I look forward to seeing you again. And the one that I want to, I was going to say the book I wanted you to write, but I'll save that for another day, maybe something else. I don't want your supper to go cold. So I will see everybody in 2 weeks when I interview Eddie Ludlow discussing whiskey tasting course. As a final note, if you don't want miss a minute of these programs, these episodes, please click subscribe, and I'll have you raise a glass, kind sir, as always. Here's the good company right over here. Here's the and out there. Thank you very much. Here's the and this is good whiskey, and the Brookletty I have as well, and Glenmorangie that we have on the other side. And here's the good conversation. Have a fantastic night, Sláinte, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.